Okay. Well, hi everyone. I'm Colleen from Hamilton, Ontario, and I've had fibromyalgia, chronic pain, for 27 years. And I became very interested in neuroplasticity about 5 years ago when I had a relapse of CFS and fibro. And I started listening to Dr. Joe Dispenza and learning about neuroplasticity. And then I came across Dr. Eleanor Stein and some of her work. She has an excellent course called Pathways to Improvement, which is an online course for ME/CFS patients, and it helps you with self-management tools. It covers quite a lot. She has a new course up and coming, which is healing through neuroplasticity, and the focus is on chronic pain. And so I have a Facebook group called Inner Sanctum, and in that group, many of us have chronic pain, and it can be so frustrating and so debilitating. And many of us have tried medications, and that's okay. But a lot of us are very interested in learning mind-body tools and in using neuroplasticity and brain retraining to try and improve the quality of our lives. So I invited Dr. Stein to speak today because I would love to hear what she knows, and she is very current on pain science, and it's just a wealth of information. She has devoted her practice to working with ME/CFS and fibromyalgia patients, and so she really does understand what we go through. And so I just want to thank her so much for coming on today to speak to us. Thank you, Dr. Stein.
Thanks, Colleen. And you said you might want to start with a question, or do you want me to introduce myself first?
Go ahead and introduce yourself first.
Yeah, so I go by Ellie, so Ellie Stein. I'm a physician and a psychiatrist. The reason I'm so interested in these areas is because of my own lived experience. I became ill in 1989, so that's 33 years ago. During my second year of residency. Up until that point, I was super healthy and active, as you can imagine, very busy training to be a psychiatrist. And all of a sudden one day, I just felt a bit unwell. I thought, oh, maybe I'm coming down with something. And really it just kind of never got better and basically continued to get worse over the next weeks and months. And as you can imagine, back in 1989, nobody knew anything about ME/CFS and not too much about fibromyalgia. So I was really in the desert. I spent probably the next 10 years doing all the wrong things because I couldn't get what I now realize is good advice. I tried to exercise my way out of it. Think my way out of it, none of that worked at all. My first big step forward was in 1997. I met Bev Tompkins, who it is or was, I'm not sure, a family doctor in Calgary. So I actually moved from Ontario to Calgary and worked with her for a year. And that was really my introduction to the power of self-management. So I changed everything I did. I changed my pacing, my sleep routines, I started attending to my low blood pressure, changed diet dramatically, basically changed my whole life to accommodate to my illness rather than trying to force my illness to accommodate to my life. And that made a huge difference. So what I learned from her has basically allowed me to continue working, albeit on a part-time basis, and have a little bit of quality of life. Nevertheless, every single day I felt horrible. Every single day I felt unrefreshed. I felt fatigued. I felt sleepy, even though I couldn't nap, right? Being in that place where you really desperately want to sleep, but you can't. I had a lot of pain. I had had chronic pain since I was about 14. from an accident playing competitive soccer. And I had low blood pressure, so I was dizzy and nauseous. It was like there was not, and of course the brain fog was horrible. That pretty much goes with that package. And I just kept learning and learning, going to conferences, meeting with experts, trying things myself. And then in 2000, I opened my practice in Calgary, which I've devoted from day one to people with what I now call the alphabet of diseases. So people with ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, environmental sensitivity, and to that I could add orthostatic intolerance, OI, POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Now we have some newer letters like MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. So all of the patients I've worked with for over 20 years have this constellation of conditions. I've worked with, I don't know exact numbers, but we'll say it's in well over 1,000. My practice is small, so I can't say I've seen thousands and thousands, but well over 1,000 patients. And I've just learned so much from them. And so what I've been able to do in my medical practice is take the information I get from the experts, which sometimes is right and sometimes isn't, right? Because the experts don't actually have lived experience, and see in my patients what works and what doesn't. And then 2.5 years ago, I've basically distilled all of that into my the Pathways course that Colleen mentioned, which is an online course teaching self-management, and specifically the things you can do yourself that don't require a doctor or a healthcare professional to help you. Because one of the big complaints from my patients is the doctors don't know enough and are sometimes unwilling to take information and prescribe things that they're not familiar with. So I felt like the biggest contribution I could make is to try to teach people what I've learned and what's helped me. And things they can do even if they don't live in an area where there are knowledgeable healthcare professionals. How I got interested in neuroplasticity. So in 2014, I had a very, very, very severely ill patient, and she decided to take the dynamic neural retraining system program. I had heard about it for many years. I had been extremely skeptical. I had a very biomedical mindset. And for many years, I wasn't really open to the possibility that mind-body intervention, so things I can do to change my mind or my brain, could actually have substantive effects on the body. So this patient, of course, thankfully didn't listen to me. She went to the training, and she got considerably better steadily over several months. I'm still in touch with her. She's continued to improve. But that really opened my eyes, and I thought, you know what? Mostly when I hear about something, I try it, right? I try it for myself. So I then went to the training. I had very significant benefit. And that started, in addition to some other things, primarily a very major diet change, led in 2017 to me having a significant bump up in my health. So for the last 5 years, I would say my energy is probably in the, say, 80 to 100% range. Some days I feel entirely well. Some days I just have that little kind of edge of fatigue that is a reminder to me that I have to be careful and continue pacing and continue doing all the self-management things that I have learned and that I implemented that I think helped me recover. And so that has given me, and the thing that kind of struck me when I got better is it was a period of time, maybe for the first time in like 25 years, that I actually hadn't been doing any medical interventions. I wasn't on any supplements. I wasn't doing any drug or injection trials or anything like that. I was purely doing self-management. And that's actually the thing that helped me recover. And now, like I said, most days I feel well. I work a full day. although I'm trying to change that. I'm retiring so I can work a bit less and enjoy life a bit more. I'm able to travel more. I'm able to walk and hike, ski, ride my bike, etc. with, like, I'm not running marathons. I met someone on the weekend who did a race that was 520 kilometers in 3 days. Okay, I'm not at that level, but I think I'm able to do what most people, healthy people my age, can do really without payback or flares. And so that's the information I'm now kind of making it my mission to pass on to other people. After I had the improvement in my own health, I was, of course, incredibly motivated to learn more about neuroplasticity, not just what's in other programs, which is do this, do this, do this, but actually the science behind it, so that I could try to construct my own program that would be very science-based and would take into account everything we know about neuroplasticity. So that's what I've been studying for like the last 10 or more years. And that's the information that is going to be launching in the next week or two in my Healing Through Neuroplasticity course. Today, I'm going to give you a preview in enough detail that hopefully you can go away from today actually having some tools to use. So it's a preview of what is neuroplasticity, how does neuroplasticity and the brain actually cause chronic pain, and therefore, how can leveraging neuroplasticity help you heal or recover? I use very strong language because over the past 7 years, I've been running groups as I'm learning with patients in my medical practice, and many of them are virtually pain-free most of the time. I mean, nobody is pain-free 100% of the time, right? Pain serves a vital purpose in the body to warn us of danger. But many people have made, very significant improvements. And I've learned from them over 7 years what things help people recover, what things get in the way. And that's what I'm also going to share with you today. But I think Colleen wants to start with a question.
That's excellent. That's very inspiring, Dr. Stein. So I wanted to start with, what is the difference between acute pain and chronic pain, and how does an acute pain, like say from a car accident, become chronic? What happens?
Yep, that's a perfect lead into the first few slides. So I'm going to share my screen and make you guys bigger so I can see who's all here. And Michael, if we could let people turn on their cameras, that would be fabulous. I love to see people, see if what I'm talking about is landing or if people are awake. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining in this morning. So this slide is just to say, what I'm providing is information. Please don't act on anything without consulting your healthcare team. So chronic pain usually starts with acute pain, just like Colleen said. Almost everybody, I'll focus on fibromyalgia because I'm guessing that's what many of you, the type of chronic pain that many of you are experiencing. So most chronic pain starts with some kind of damage, like a car accident, an infection, a surgery. Those are probably the 3 most common. What happens when we have acute pain? The signal from wherever the injured part is travels to the brain. The brain evaluates all the information. The signal is only one piece of information. It evaluates the whole scenario to figure out whether you're in danger or not. If the brain thinks you're in danger, it produces pain and other things to get your attention. So some of the examples of what the brain does, it makes pain, sends out pain signals, it increases cortisol levels, it focuses your attention, it may institute movement, like get you to move, say you're putting your hand on the hot stove to make you move. So it has a whole, it changes endocrine function, immune function. So the brain puts into play changes in a whole bunch of body systems to help the body deal with the perceived danger. Now, most tissue damage, say from a car accident, from an injury, from an infection, heals in about 8 weeks. And so slowly, I mean, some things heal much, much faster, of course. 8 weeks is kind of the maximum. And so slowly, as the tissues heal, the brain should get that information and should say, oh, we're not in as much danger anymore. I don't need to send out as much pain. We're okay, we're safe. Sometimes, for reasons that I think are still being figured out, I don't think we 100% understand why some people heal normally and pain gradually goes down, and other people, the brain gets stuck. It still thinks we're in danger, even though the tissues have healed. So the definition of chronic or persistent pain is that it's pain that lasts more than 8 weeks, basically, because within 8 weeks, substantive, if not total, tissue healing has taken place. And if the pain is lasting longer than that, it means the brain is misjudging or misperceiving the situation and is sending out pain signals even when there's no danger. I'm going to show you a slide to just show you what that, again, I love science because it helps kind of validate these concepts. So this is a picture showing the differences in the brain between acute and chronic pain. So acute pain is the red ovals and the blue triangles. Those are both acute types of pain. Nociceptive means you hit your finger with the hammer and signals are coming up to the brain telling you there's a problem. And you can see where those are in the brain. Nociplastic pain is a new word that's come out about 5 years ago from the International Association for the Study of Pain. They're like the world pain experts who define pain and decide on diagnostic criteria and give names to things. And they came out with this new word, nociplastic pain, meaning noci meaning noxious, so ow, and plastic referring to neuroplasticity. So it's now kind of built into the, I don't know what to call it, the Bible of pain, that neuroplasticity causes chronic pain. And in the category of nociplastic pain, it's all types of chronic pain, but fibromyalgia is the poster child. So this category really developed in large part due to research into fibromyalgia. And what you'll see is it's in the parts of the brain that are active in fibromyalgia and other types of chronic pain, like it could be chronic arthritis pain, chronic migraine pain, chronic pelvic pain, chronic TMJ pain, low back pain, pain from people who have, say, rheumatoid arthritis or other autoimmune diseases. 30% of those people, even though the pain is acute and inflammatory, 30% of them get brain changes which cause this type of nociplastic pain in addition to their acute pain. And when they do brain studies and they put all the information together, this is from a big meta-analysis comparison of a whole bunch of different types of chronic pains, you can see that the areas of the brain that are active in chronic or nociplastic pain are totally different than in acute pain. So from a biological perspective, acute and chronic pain are very different, and they are processed or caused by different parts of the brain. So I'm going to go on and talk about how this happens at a neuron level. Many of you have heard of Hebb's law, also called the first law of neuroplasticity. And it is what fires together, wires together. What that means is every time we fire a neuron, every time we fire a bunch of neurons, because say we're doing something, we're thinking, feeling or doing something. Like right now, I'm moving my hands, I'm watching you guys, I'm looking at my slide, trying to stay on topic, all of those things. So I've got a whole bunch of neurons firing. And all the neurons that I'm firing right now at the same time, I'm strengthening the synapses or neuronal connections and the pathways that combine those neurons. We have 100 billion neurons. And when we're a baby, not very many of them are connected. It's why babies need to practice to learn to do things. So as a baby learns to walk, every time they practice, even if they fall down, all those different neurons that are required to coordinate all the different parts of the body to walk get fired together, and the wiring gets stronger and stronger. So it's called learning. And the baby gets better and better at walking. That's neuroplasticity. And the pathways that the baby doesn't use anymore, like crawling pathways, those neurons, the synapses break apart and the resources get recycled and used for other things. So it's an incredibly active process. Everything we focus on and do repeatedly, the neural pathways get stronger. And the things that we don't do, the pathways break down. And this is a picture of literally this is a real brain, probably at autopsy. Don't think it's a live person because they injected dye into the brain, but it shows what the neural pathways look like. Like they're real structures. You can see them and measure them on functional MRI. And on functional MRI, neuroplasticity is proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. There's hundreds, maybe even thousands of studies showing that if you teach an animal or a person some new skill, within 10 hours, you can see changes in these neural networks on functional MRI. So 10 hours of practice is enough to see some small changes. The other thing that's really important about neuroplasticity is that the brain can be mistaken. So here's an example of a nice shiny knee, has a nice joint space, no like bony bits sticking off. So this is a nice knee with no arthritis. Say you bump your knee. The signal goes up from the knee to the spinal cord and then up to the brain. The brain decides, based on its overall opinion of safety or danger, whether to send pain signals or not. If it sends pain signals, it's like a music amplifier, right? The signal comes back to the body up to 100 times stronger than the signal that went to the brain in the first place. And it depends not only on the strength of the signal, but on things like, am I worried about this? Are there visual or auditory or smell signals that make this situation look ominous? Then the brain is going to amplify or turn the volume up on the signal. Conversely, you can have a scraggly looking knee like this one on the right, where the joint space is totally gone. So this is a knee with significant arthritis. It also sends messages to the brain that maybe something is wrong. But if the brain judges in the big picture, there's no danger, it can send this negative here, a negative signal, and basically turn the volume down on those signals. It's called descending inhibition. Very well studied, and actually some of the leading researchers in this are from Montreal. So a lot of Canadian research in pain. So some examples of this modulation, just to make it a little bit more easy to understand. Two extreme examples. One is phantom limb pain. A person has an amputation, the limb is no longer there, so there's no tissue damage because there's no tissue. And yet 70% of people with phantom limb pain have excruciating pain. How could this be? It's because the brain isn't getting good messages. In fact, it's getting very few messages because the limb isn't there. And it fears the worst. It goes, oh my gosh, there's something wrong. And it turns up the amplifier. Conversely, athletes often get injured during a game or a performance. And they often keep going because they don't perceive the danger, because they're ramped up on adrenaline and endorphins, and they're so focused on the goal of winning the competition or completing the performance that they don't even notice the pain. So these are examples where pain can be amplified or diminished. So the bottom line from this science research is that neuroplasticity is both the cause and the cure for chronic pain, because just as the brain can amplify pain in an inaccurate way, it can also be taught to decrease the volume on the amplifier. And so that's what I'm going to talk about now, how to actually do that. I want to say also that neuroplasticity occurs at an unconscious level. So we can't directly tell our brain, oh, do this or do this. But by repeating the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors we want to teach our brain, we can influence which neural circuits are being strengthened and which are being broken down. So this information is coming from a podcast by a series of podcasts by Dr. Andrew Huberman. He has a podcast called the Huberman Lab Podcast, and it's Huberman. His first 5 episodes in January 2021, when he first started, are on neuroplasticity. And for anybody who wants to really delve in deeper, he's got a lot of great information. So here's what he recommends. He recommends first optimizing alertness. If you're too drowsy, learning won't happen optimally. And if you're too wired on adrenaline, say you're in fear or anxiety, it also won't be optimal. So you want to have your alertness in the sweet spot. You want to focus your attention, because when we do things like you're listening right now, that new information is being stored in the temporal lobes in the hippocampus on both sides. If we don't get a good rest or sleep that night, it gets replaced the next day by what we learn the next day, and it will be lost. When we sleep at night, that's when the brain moves the information from the temporary storage to the permanent storage, which is in the cortex. And how does it decide? The cortex doesn't have unlimited space. So how does the brain decide which information to store? It does it based on what we pay attention to. This is so important for chronic pain or any health symptom. Pain demands our attention. Yet, the more we pay attention to it, the more we're hardwiring all the pathways that are supporting the experience of pain. So this gives a hint already as to how we could shift things. We need to change the focus of attention. Then we want to practice the new skill that we're paying attention to. And in the next couple of slides, I'm going to suggest some ideas of what that might look like. We're always going to make mistakes, just like the baby learning to walk who falls down multiple times. That's actually fabulous because it alerts the brain that there's a mismatch between what it's attempting to do and what's actually happening. It focuses the attention and it helps the brain learn better. So mistakes are absolutely okay. And lastly, like I mentioned, you need to rest and ideally sleep so that what you've just learned can be hardwired. So I recommend with my new neuroplasticity course, probably people will have better success if they take the pathways course or some other self-management approach first, so that they're stable and getting good sleep, then the neuroplasticity is going to be much more effective. So the strategy I'm recommending to you, I've named active redirection. This idea, so I've pulled together ideas from many experts. This one is from a manual called Neuroplastic Transformation, Your Brain on Pain. And it's by the primary author is Michael Moskowitz, who's a retired psychiatrist in San Francisco, who himself developed excruciating chronic shoulder pain and did years of research in the scientific literature to develop this strategy. And it's the strategy that in my groups and with my patients seems to be the most effective. So here's what you do. Each time you notice pain, and you're probably saying to me, yes, that's like always. Nevertheless, sometimes you notice it more than others, right? So each time it impinges into your awareness, it's an opportunity to actively shift the focus of your attention from pain to prevent building up those pathways and making them stronger to something else that you actually want to teach your brain. So the activities you could choose should be things you enjoy, otherwise you're not going to do them reliably. Things that are incompatible with pain. So things that elevate your mood are incompatible with pain. Why? Because 6 of the 9 pain processing centers in the brain also process mood, but they're in opposite directions. It's like a teeter-totter. If pain is low, mood is high to some degree, and vice versa. So if you on purpose elevate your mood, the pain will go down. That's just how the biology of those centers work. And lastly, it should take your full attention. Many, if not most people I work with tell me that they try not to think about their pain and they have a bunch of ways of distracting themselves. Distraction, in my experience, is not effective. You have to be paying attention because of that circle I just showed you where focused attention is important. It's like a yellow highlighter. So when you're sleeping and the brain is transferring that information to the hard drive, the permanent storage, it recognizes this is the information to save. If you're on autopilot, mindless distraction, it won't know to save that experience. Why does this active redirection work so successfully? It's because, again, of biology. The neuron cannot do 2 things at once. Brain areas that process pain also perform other functions, but not at the same time. So when you recognize pain, that's like the person standing at this fork in the road. You can either do your usual habitual behavior of thinking, feeling, and acting on pain. Thinking, this is horrible, I hate this, I can't go on like this, how will this end? Nobody understands, nobody has solutions. These are pain-related thoughts. Emotions would be things like, I'm so scared this pain is getting worse. What if it gets worse and I can't look after myself? What if I can't work? How am I going to survive, et cetera, et cetera. Behaviors, pain-related behaviors are things like avoiding behaviors, resting, using ice, using heat, I don't know, going to tons of appointments. Although all those things are understandable, over the long term, at the neurological level, they're reinforcing the pain pathways. So you have a choice. You can go down that habitual road, or you can make a decision to do something different. That's active redirection. And as long as you're doing something fun, meaningful, creative, soothing, etc., those neurons are busy. You've just engaged them and they're not available to process pain. So in the moment where you're doing an on-purpose practice that's incompatible with pain, the pain will go down. Here's some examples of what redirection might look like. It uses all of the senses. Calming scents like peppermint oil. Visualizing, many coaches think, is one of the most powerful methods. So an example would be visualizing the temperature of the brain falling, visualizing little fire hoses pouring water on the fiery pain centers in the brain to extinguish the fires. I love doing a change of color. So if I'm picturing the hot pain brain in like yellows and oranges and reds, I picture those colors cooling to greens and blues. Self-talk, reminding yourself that when you experience persistent pain, the brain is mistaken, and reminding the brain that you're fine, you're safe, and you do not need it to be pumping out pain signals. Soft touch, smooth rock, soft blankie. Exercise, I'm going to talk about a little bit later. It is extremely helpful, but only if done in a systematic, incremental way. Obviously, if you haven't been exercising for years because of severe chronic pain and you undertake like some ambitious program going to the gym, you're going to crash and burn. So I've got some suggestions later on of how to approach it. And then emotions, positive emotions, love, connection, empathy, compassion. There, believe it or not, there's research data showing that these help decrease pain. So the last part of the presentation, I've kind of described what to do. And quickly, I'm going to go through what I call neuroplasticity boosters. So active redirection is how you activate the first law of neuroplasticity and you build new pathways in keeping with how the new life that you want to live, the life of being comfortable and active and vital and sharp in the brain. But there's additional things you can do which will make you more successful in this quest. So the first one is building safety. This work comes from the NOI group in Australia, the people who wrote Explain Pain, Lorimer Moseley and David Butler. They talk about DIMS and SIMS and how if you construct your day on purpose to include as many things as possible that help you feel safe and other positive emotions, it decreases pain perception at a biological level. This is, again, a ton of research to prove this. Conversely, if you have many experiences in your day that make you feel anxious, scared, sad, hopeless, or in danger, pain will increase. So this is where the body and the mind meet. Things that you think and feel and experience change your biology. And the beauty is you have a lot of influence on what things happen in your day and how you respond to them. So for example, say you get a letter from your insurance company that they're reevaluating you. This is a frequent occurrence that causes incredible anxiety. If you could develop some ways of dealing with that to keep your autonomic nervous system calm, it's going to have less impact on pain than if you kind of let the worry run away with you. So it's not only what you experience, but it's also how you interpret and how you respond to the experiences. So if you include in your day sensory experiences of safety, you do things you enjoy, you say things that are positive or optimistic, you take to heart what I'm sharing with you today, that chronic pain is not a sign of tissue damage. It's a sign of neuroplasticity changes in your brain and that it is curable. That's going to decrease anxiety quite a bit and start moving you in the direction that you want to go. If you go to places that make you feel good, maybe less appointments and more parks. If you hang out with people who talk about positive things, who believe in you, encourage you, this is going to be helpful. And if you're able to accurately interpret what's happening, say you have a flare, this happens, right? You have chronic pain, flares are part of the life experience. But if you remember when you're in that flare, that it's caused by your brain, not by your body, and you're working on it and you're on the path to recovery. That makes a huge difference. So I'm not going to go through these in depth because I want to make sure there's enough time for you to all ask questions. But basically, neuroplasticity works better when you have a calm, balanced autonomic nervous system. And these are 3 of many strategies. 2 weeks ago, I hosted a webinar called Activating the Vagus Nerve. The recording is available on my website for purchase. And that webinar just gave like dozens and dozens of suggestions on how to activate the vagus nerve to calm and balance the autonomic nervous system. One of the most accessible, free, it's available to you anytime, day or night, is breathing. So just one example of paced breathing. Paced breathing to activate the vagus nerve is any breathing in which the exhale is slower than the inhale. So when you slow the exhale, it activates the vagus nerve and calms your system. So this 4-7-8 breathing, breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8, is one of the most calming breathings. And if you'd like an example, a tutorial, you can go to this you just type in your search engine, Dr. Andrew Weil and breathing, and it will pop up. Now, exercise is good for us, but of course it's extremely fraught for people with chronic pain. So I'm going to move to this slide. My suggestion is, if you're able to do a little bit of movement without flaring your pain, these types of what's called mindful movement might be a great place to start. I have many patients who do Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, Feldenkrais. These are all very, very slow, gentle movements where you're not contracting your muscles fully. So my suggestion is try to find an activity that's within your energy envelope. You can always push it a little bit later when you're able to do so. And it has to be enjoyable because this is a new lifestyle. This isn't like the 1 month get well quick plan and then you're good. This is, how can I introduce movement into my life ongoing? And some of you may be in the unfortunate position where your pain is so severe you just have basically stopped all movement. And in this case, there's a whole literature on a strategy called graded motor imagery, in which you slowly, incrementally use imagining pain or looking at images. Imagining pain, no, that's not it. Imagining movement, or looking at other people moving, maybe even imagining, like when the brain gets so oversensitive due to neuroplasticity, for some people, even thinking about moving triggers their pain. And this is just, again, proving that the brain is so involved, because if you haven't actually moved your muscle, it shouldn't cause pain, right? So this is like more evidence. If you're one of these people that even thinking about pain causes discomfort, it's really strong evidence that your brain is involved. So you're instructed in this approach to start by either watching videos or other people move in ways that are gentle and non-triggering, and then move to imagining yourself moving. And eventually, as that becomes more and more comfortable, as your brain gets the memo that this isn't dangerous, then you can slowly increase the types of movement, how fast the movement is, how much muscle contractions needed to implement the movement. And you can finally, over time, move into the areas that currently you wouldn't consider doing, that are like at the top of the pyramid in the red zone. They will slowly become available to you. Noticing and attending to your beliefs is incredibly important. I'm just going to give you one, again, scientific example proving this, because many of you might think, Well, if I have to believe that I can get better, that's a bit woo-woo, and the mind-body thing isn't for me, right? I want like hardcore science. So here's the hardcore science about belief. It's called the milkshake study. It was done by a psychology professor at Stanford University called Alia Crum, C-R-U-M. They gave participants the same identical milkshake on 2 occasions. And on the 2 occasions, they gave them different information. So on one occasion, they were told the milkshake was a healthy, low-calorie, nutritious drink. Sometime later, or before, I'm sure they juggled the order, they gave them the exact same milkshake, and they were told it was a high-fat, indulgent, high-calorie treat. Yummy milkshake. On both occasions, they measured a bunch of blood work, including the hormone called ghrelin, G-H-R-E-L-I-N, which is the hormone our body produces when we're hungry. It makes us eat. The people who were given, who were told the milkshake was the high-calorie indulgent milkshake, their ghrelin level was low because they thought they were full. The exact same people given the exact same milkshake who were told it was a healthy, low-calorie milkshake, their ghrelin levels were high because they thought they were still hungry and needed more food. So this is an example of how belief can change biology at below the level of consciousness. So if you harbor the belief that fibromyalgia or chronic pain is a permanent condition which you can never recover from, and which is going to cause you untold misery and functional limitation, even if you're not thinking it at every moment, but that's kind of your core belief about your situation. And even though it might be true based on your experience up until now, you didn't come up with that belief out of nowhere, it's going to hold you back, because those beliefs are activating neurons that are going to counteract the practice that you might start doing based on, say, what you've learned today. Conversely, if you're open to the possibility that even though you've been stuck with chronic pain for ages, and I'm sure many of you have, I had it for 25 years, that it's caused by the brain and it is absolutely possible to change it, that underlying belief is going to work with you. And your Dr. Crum describes how you still have to do the biological things, right? But the belief will help augment and support it. So lastly, just to reinforce what I said before, that mood and pain are tightly connected. And therefore, if you on purpose do things, schedule fun, love, connection, accomplishment, creativity, the things that elevate your mood, if you schedule them every single day, you will notice your pain go down, because your brain goes, we're painting a picture. We must not be in mortal danger. And it turns down the amplifier. So a couple frequently asked questions, and then I'll open it up to your questions. What type of pain will respond? Every type of chronic pain, because every type of chronic pain has that functional MRI image where those green spots are lit up. Even if there's an acute component, even if it's recurrent migraines, even if you have lupus, even if you have arthritis, you have the capacity to turn down the amplifier with neuroplastics practice. And then the other question I get asked really often is, okay, great, I'm motivated, I believe you, I want to start today, how long does it take? I gave a talk much shorter than this in one of my medical practice groups 2 months ago. I then went on holidays. I came back, I have check-in at the start of every group, and one person said, with only this information and not even in as much detail as I've given you, she started practicing every single day. 2 months later, which was last week, the direct quote is, "I have a handle now on my pain." So you can make changes quickly. Like I said before, the research shows that in as little as 10 hours of practice, usually in the context of an hour a day, you can see changes in MRI within 10 days. So within 4 weeks, we'll say maybe 4 to 8 weeks, most people with repeated practice can get to the point that while they're practicing, while they're shifting the focus of their attention to something more enjoyable, the pain goes down. In the early stages, what happens is as soon as you stop the practice, the pain bounces back right away, okay? It's what I call an immediate effect. By 8 to 12 weeks, most people start experiencing a residual effect, which means they do their practice, the pain comes down in the moment. They stop the practice because they have to drive their kids to school, cook dinner, whatever. And there's a bit of a residual effect. The pain doesn't come back right away, or it doesn't come back quite as strongly. By 12 to 24 weeks, most people start noticing that without even thinking about it, their pain has come down. So my favorite example of this was very recent. Someone came to my pain group. So I've been, teaching this stuff for a number of years. And she said, last night, I watched a movie, a 2-hour movie with my husband. And it wasn't until the end of the movie that I realized I hadn't had any pain and that I actually hadn't even watched a movie in years because sitting, is so uncomfortable. And she didn't even think about it. He said, "You want to watch a movie?" She said, "Sure." She watched the movie. And it was only afterwards she went, "Oh my gosh, this is new." And so that means the brain has rewired. The defaults have shifted. And for her now, her default is no pain rather than having the default of pain. Most programs, like Joe Dispenza, who Colleen mentioned, recommend daily practice of an hour a day for 6 months to really consolidate the changes. For me, I've been practicing for 8 years because what I know is if I go back to my old way of thinking and being, which was a bit of a miserable approach, my brain is going to change back, right? So the thing about neuroplasticity is it's constant change. And it's not a quick fix. Like I can change quickly for the better, but I can also relapse quickly for the worse if I go back to my old habits. So for me, this neuroplastic practice is for life. I'm going to keep hanging out with people who practice it. I'm going to keep studying it. I'm going to keep trying to refine it, and I'm going to keep practicing. One last slide, other frequently asked questions. What will make it more effective for me? So the daily practice, at least for the first 6 months, seems extremely important. If you have a good week and you think, oh, I've got it under control now, and you stop practicing, you'll slip back quite quickly because the brain hasn't had time to change in a really solid way. People who don't change their inner and outer dialogue, so they continue to be pessimistic, they don't really buy in, they think it's really not going to work. Again, because of that milkshake study, it's working against them. So they don't have as much success. You have to be motivated and put stickies all over your house in every single room to remind you that every time you have pain, you need to actively redirect, because it's really, really hard to remember. Pain is a huge habit that most of us have had for decades. And for me, when I get a symptom, sometimes I'm like sucked into the vortex of that symptom, and hours go by before I remember, oh my gosh, I have tools, I can do something different. So it's really prioritizing remembering and setting yourself reminders, and then being willing to put in the time. The time of an hour a day, don't let it scare you, because it's a total time. So if every time you become aware of pain, you actively redirect even for a couple of minutes, but you do it many times during the day, it's going to add up to an hour. So I'm going to stop my share, and maybe Colleen is going to, she may have a few more questions to start us off. And then we'll open it. And we have such a small group. I'm happy to open it that you can just turn on your mics and ask your question verbally rather than in the chat.
Okay, I have a question, Dr. Stein.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do you do if you wake up in pain every morning? So obviously, as you're saying, it's a habit, but let's say we've been sleeping all night. We haven't been thinking about being in pain, or we haven't been paying attention to it because we've been asleep, but we get up, stand up, and we notice the sensations of pain. How do we redirect first thing in the morning when that is the first thing we notice?
So that would be the norm, right? That's almost everybody with chronic pain feels very creaky and in pain when they wake up. That's just, that would be like 90% of people. So here's an example of one person who's been recently in my group. He said to himself, okay, I'm waking up and I'm feeling crappy every single morning. And he kept thinking about, because it's so compelling, the crappy feeling is so compelling. How can you think of anything else, right? But he just made a decision that he was going to focus on other things. So he would go into the shower, focus on the water. He would get his coffee, he would focus on the coffee. He would focus on the parts of his body that weren't in pain, because it's usually not every single molecule. It's usually, you know, so for FM, it's like the large muscles, right? The hips, the upper legs, the back, the shoulders and neck. So what about my fingers? Oh, my fingers feel good. Maybe you're someone who plays an instrument. Go play it for 10 minutes. Feel how good it feels. Put on music that you like. Focus on the music. Phone a friend. Maybe you have, it's really, really helpful if you're doing neuroplasticity practice to have a buddy. So the morning would be the ideal time to, you know, check in, FaceTime, whatever you do, check in with your buddy. Hey, I'm up, I'm feeling great, right? So also shift the focus of your attention. If you connect with your buddy and it's a gripe fest, oh my God, my pain is worse today than ever. This is not going to help you. You could, so one of the things people do when they connect with their buddy is they share a success, no matter how tiny, maybe a success from the previous day. I did this yesterday. I made dinner, whatever. I went for a 5-minute walk. I phoned a friend I haven't talked to for a long time. I practice good sleep hygiene, like whatever it is you're working on that you had success with. This will get your day off to a great start. I do this with every single buddy I practice with, and it seems so simple, but it puts a smile on our face. Like, and then you're listening to the other person's success. So even if you thought your success was kind of wimpy, maybe chances are their success, you're going to go, hey, wow, good for you. Now you've got a smile on your face. Now there's a little bit of dopamine in your system. And you're like, okay, I'm good to go. So it's like, do whatever it takes to shift the focus of your attention. What you don't want to do is go grab your heating pad. So even though that people tell heat helps, and just as an example, further information, if heat helps your pain, that is strong evidence of neuroplasticity being involved. So if you have an actual acute tissue damage, like I just hit my finger with the hammer, you would never put heat on, right? It would increase inflammation. It's already red and hot and throbbing. The last thing you do is put heat on. You would put ice on it. Chronic pain, it's different, right? It's biologically different. And almost everybody tells me they spend a lot of their life on heat. You don't want to do that because heat is a safety behavior. The problem is not in the tissue. Heat actually won't change your biology. It will temporarily, like it will have an effect because heat is comforting, but it won't change the problem, right? It's a temporary distraction. What you want to do is an activity that is incompatible with your pain, like go outside. Say you can't even walk, but we know going outside in the morning for 10 minutes like wakes up your system and syncs your body to the sun and like has amazingly positive effects. Do that. Wrap yourself in a ski jacket and a warm blanket, go sit outside for 10 minutes and listen to the birds. Do whatever it takes to get your mind out of that misery. Your brain's in a habit. So it's the fact that you weren't thinking about it all night doesn't matter because you have this brain default. And what you're trying to do is change the default by every single day over and over. This is probably even a Joe Dispenza quote, right? Every day over and over, whether you feel like it or not, do something different over and over. The brain will change. It has no choice. Like the laws of neuroplasticity work 100% of the time. So maybe unless you have advanced Alzheimer's, that might be an exception. So every time you do something different and you pay attention to highlight it, so the brain saves it in long-term memory that night, you're building those new pathways. And over time, the new pathways will become stronger than the old ones. And that's what I call like your new default.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so an example of that would be, let's say we get up in the morning and immediately notice the sensation. One of the things we could do is something like smile.
Absolutely, because that's incompatible with pain, right? So if you're smiling, the brain goes, oh, this must not be so dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like all those little signals you can give your brain to convince it of the truth, right? We're not trying to brainwash or trick the brain. It's the brain that's misperceiving. The tissue is not the problem.
Okay.
If the tissue were the problem, this strategy wouldn't work at all. And if you go to any testimonial website, I mean, there's just literally thousands of people reporting their benefits. So it definitely works.
Okay. I have another actual question. You spoke about mood and pain. So Dr. John Sarno talks about journaling and expressive writing in terms of getting repressed anger, fear, shame, guilt out. How effective is this? And is this rewiring our brains if we practice it?
So I don't know because I've never done journal writing about a symptom myself. To me, it seems like that's kind of focusing more on the symptom.
Mm-hmm.
I've read one of Dr. Sarno's books, so his name just pops up all over the place, right, when you're working in this space of chronic pain. And so I bought 2 of his books. I made it through the first one. I gave the second one to Goodwill. I do not agree with him. He makes a very clear all or nothing statement in his, I can't remember which book I bought. He's got a bunch out, that all chronic pain is due to repressed emotion. I wrote it down because like all or nothing in medicine. So right away I'm suspect because nothing in medicine or biology is all or nothing. We're all different. I have gotten rid of a lot of pain, didn't work on repressed emotion at all. Of course, I have issues. I'm in therapy. That's also a lifestyle for me to kind of stay on top of my issues. But I've had people, many dozens of people who have taken my group where we've solely focused on neuroplasticity and the stuff that I shared with you today. We haven't talked at all about repressed emotion, and they're virtually cured of their pain. So where I have also, though, just to, play the other side, because we're all different, I have a very close friend who's in excruciating chronic pain that's been going for years. She's working on all this neuroplasticity stuff. She has some good days, but she's not out of the woods. She, I think, listened to a podcast or read something by him, and she immediately connected and went, yes, I resonate with that. I have repressed emotion. and, you know, I won't say what all her issues are. I kind of know where the emotion lies. She's had a lot of trauma and difficulty in her life. So what I would say is, for some people, repressed emotion is an issue. How will you know if that's you? So I've had a bunch of people take my groups, which are very science-based and neuroplasticity kind of strategy-based. And some of them have gotten to a certain point where maybe the pain's at a dull roar, or their symptoms are at a dull roar, and they're being reflective and they're noticing themselves, and they're like, you know what, I have trauma. It's causing anxiety and depression, and it's holding me back. They've then gone to get therapy for those issues, and they've just taken off with the two combined. So I would say, if you know you have trauma, if you know you have, say, anger, a lot of people have a lot of anger because the pain has interfered. People don't understand, like, when you have pain, now you're being exposed to a whole bunch of interpersonal relationships that are negative, right? And frustrating and holding us back. So if you sense that that's you, please work on those issues. I'm not sure. So I think, I'm not sure writing about the issues without direction is going to be that helpful, but absolutely maybe getting professional help with those issues could be extremely helpful. There's an online practitioner, her name is Irene Lyon, Lyon, and she, I haven't taken her courses myself. They're all about trauma and resolving trauma. And I've had several of my patients take her online courses and find them extremely helpful. So I would say, if you have trauma, if you have depression, if you have anxiety, if you have anger, please get help. It can only help you recover from your pain. But I do not agree with Dr. Sarno that it's the cause of all pain.
Okay,
Sorry,
so
I'm giving you super long answers to short questions. I'll try to be more concise.
that's okay. So Charlene has a question.
Sure, go ahead, Charlene. You can just turn your mic on. And just to say, Charlene, we're only using your first name and you're not spotlighted. So on the video, you're still going to be anonymous. Oh, you had it for a second and then you went back to mute.
It
Okay.
says the host. Okay.
Yeah, you're good. Yep.
Okay, so I have one question just with my personal things that I do. For instance, when I'm sitting here, when I start feeling pain, I have an instant reaction to start stretching and moving around, which kind of gives me pain, but feels so good at the same time. Would that be an example of putting heat on it, where I'm exacerbating my pain, or is that
Right, is it helping or hurting?
Yeah.
So everything I talked about in the presentation is very science-based, and like I can show you the studies to back it up. Now we're in the realm of opinion, right? And personal experience. Generally, to overcome symptoms, one of the strategies is what we call kind of incremental training. So for example, some people have so much pain they can't sit at all. I don't know, some of you may be lying down for all I know, because you don't all have your video cameras on. And the best approach to overcome that would be incrementally, like try sit for 2 minutes on purpose for no apparent reason, right? Like just as for the purpose of practicing and teaching your body that sitting is not dangerous. If you sit down to a long webinar, like an hour and a half, like we're headed towards, it's probably outside what we call your training zone. So you're going to have discomfort, right? You're not there yet. So on the other hand, and so what some people do when they're online with me, because most of my sessions tend to go a bit longer, is they just get up from time to time, proactively. So you might sit for 10 minutes, and before you even notice the pain developing, you might get up and move around and stretch, and then come back and do another 10 minutes or 1 minute, right? Everyone's at a different place in their path. But I would say the incremental training is a great way to build resilience around certain things that you want to accomplish. Of course, what happens in real life is you have something like this where now we've been sitting for 73 minutes and you're outside your zone.
Mhm.
And so in general, you want to avoid having too many of those involuntary surprise marathons, because every time you experience pain, like when you said it to me, you went, like there was a little kind of contraction, like, oh, here I am again. So you kind of want to avoid that as much as possible, because each time you go, the brain is going, oh, this is dangerous. And you want to, daily train the brain that it's actually not dangerous. The problem isn't in your muscles. The problem is in the brain, and you're changing it.
Okay. My other question more relates to ME/CFS or long COVID. It's my understanding that those conditions are an autonomic nervous system condition. How does pain relate to the autonomic nervous system? So is the pain, do they have a direct correlation? And is the pain related, like caused by the autonomic nervous system? And will neuroplasticity fix other autonomic nervous system symptoms like that go along with it?
So what I would say about ME/CFS, so just for clarity for if there's anyone else here with long COVID, or people with long COVID, or people will watch the recording who have long COVID, about 50% of people with long COVID look virtually identical to ME/CFS, and the other 50% don't. So the 50% who don't look the same are the ones who have the heart, lung, kidney, and blood clotting issues, or they have kind of damage to their bodies from having been hospitalized and on a ventilator in an ICU. So they have quite different problems. The 50% who look like ME/CFS are the ones who have severe fatigue, low stamina, which we also call post-exertional malaise, unrefreshing sleep. So even though they're exhausted, they can't kind of catch up, brain fog. And that 50% also have autonomic nervous system dysfunction, meaning they have trouble remaining upright, they have trouble maintaining a stable heart rate and blood pressure and breathing. I would say, I'm not sure the autonomic nervous system is at the core of those disorders, although if you listen to Dr. David Systrom from Harvard, he would differ with me. He's finding some very solid findings that the blood pressure and the blood coming back to the heart and how much blood the heart's pumping out seem to be definitely affected in both ME and this 50% of long COVID people. So the autonomic nervous system is absolutely involved, but it may be that the immune system is at the core, because these are post-infectious disorders. The trigger is an infection. And so probably it's the immune system that has somehow gone astray. And it's probably an energy disorder at its core. The immune system has taken up all the energy, and somehow the mitochondria have been downsized or downregulated, and they're not allowed to make enough energy. And then my belief is, with low energy, the autonomic nervous system can't work properly because it doesn't have enough energy. So that's my opinion. And, time will tell what's at the core. If the autonomic nervous system is in fight or flight, meaning we're on adrenaline for whatever reason, we're on adrenaline because we just overdid it. We went outside our energy envelope. We're on adrenaline because we didn't get enough sleep. We're on adrenaline because we just ate something or smelled something we're sensitive to, for the people with chemical and food sensitivities. we're on adrenaline because we're upset, angry, or depressed because something's just happened. All of those things at the cellular level augment pain. So that's why calming and balancing the autonomic nervous system is one of the neuroplasticity boosters that I talk about. I don't think it causes the pain. I think the brain causes the pain, but the autonomic nervous system can turn up the amplifier.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I have a question here from someone. It says, can having a good day with amazing emotions trigger a fibro flare?
Probably. So I haven't seen the research for fibro, but I've seen the research with MECFS that all exertion can trigger post-exertional malaise. So if I translate that to fibromyalgia, it would be all exertion can flare pain, and exertion can be positive or negative. Sometimes exertion is because you were having a fabulous time and you stayed at the party a little bit longer than you expected, or you talked to your friend on the phone longer because you were having such a great conversation, or you were at an outing and it was so much fun, you stayed. So absolutely, it's the exertion part that probably somehow the brain, so we have this other terminology, unconscious conditioning. In fibromyalgia, in the cases where the brain is misperceiving the situation, it's unconsciously linked activity to pain, even though it doesn't make sense because activity actually helps pain in healthy people. But our goal in neuroplastic practice is to pull apart that unconscious conditioning that is pairing things we enjoy and want to do with pain and rewire it and make new connections that those things are safe.
Okay, I have a question. What do we do in a severe flare? Do we do movement or do we rest? What do we do?
I'm all about balance. So again, everybody's different. This is an opinion, right? There's no study that I'm aware of. How could that be? There's no study on flares. Like, really? Obviously, we need a lot of research on that. I'm always kind of in favor of moderation. If there's anything I've learned over my own 33 years of illness experience, every time I get a bright idea, I'm going to do this every time. I'm going to push it. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to get this. Like, I crash and burn. So what I would say is ask your body what it needs. Body, in this moment, what do you need? Do I need rest? Do I need movement? Do I need food? If you have low blood pressure, do I need salt? Do I need comfort? Do I need, I don't know, music? Like, what do I need? And get really good at listening to your body and giving it what it needs. Now, on the other hand, if because of fear, you think that your body always needs a safety behavior, i.e. rest, it's worth experimenting with other options just to see if that's true. Because your brain is telling you you're in a flare, but actually the brain is creating the flare in the first place. So many of my patients with fibromyalgia as their primary health condition actually find that when they start introducing mindful, gentle exercise, it actually helps. And they never tried it before because they're so kind of constricted and scared and like consumed by the flare. For example, one person just this week in a group said, I've started, this person goes outside in the middle of the night, believe it or not. So we were talking about sleep. And they said, I know this sounds crazy, but when I wake up and I can't fall back asleep, I don't know if it was for pain in this case, I've gone outside in the middle of the night for 10 minutes. It's so peaceful and calm and quiet. And I look at the stars And even though it's counterintuitive, I came back in and was able to fall asleep quickly. So what I would say is be really experimental. Don't assume that just because every other time you tried gentle movement, maybe it backfired on you. Maybe try it a little differently, a little less, and see if you can find a way. Because if you do gentle movement when you're in a flare, you're giving your brain a new message. You're giving your brain the message that A, it's safe to move, and B, movement might even help. We know in FM movement helps, right? Literature is, I won't go into it all, but there's lots and lots of studies. The big meta-analyses have actually been, again, Canadian. They're out of the University of Ottawa. So we know that mild to moderate regular movement, especially aerobic, so something like gentle walking, the swim class in the hot pool, doing the mindful, restorative yoga, things like that. So things that are very gentle, they just get your heart rate up a little bit, maybe to 100, 110 beats per minute, nothing crazy. We know that overall helps people with fibromyalgia.
Okay. How helpful is vagal toning? We know about polyvagal theory and toning the vagus nerve and using vagus stimulators. One thing I noticed is several times in the summer, I was very flared, and this happened 3 or 4 times. I went to the pool, which was cool water. Once I got into that cool water, and I couldn't believe it, it went away and my energy improved. And I was in the pool for over an hour. Wow. And I wanted to keep trying that to see. And it actually, yes, it kept improving the flare. The flare would settle down. So what does that have to do? Is the cold water helping?
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, in general, I'm sure there's studies out there on autonomic nervous system and pain, but I'm not familiar with them. But in general, if the autonomic nervous system is calm, the brain gets the message of safety and it will turn down the amplifier.
Okay, so
everyone, it's going to be different. Like someone else, like I myself have not, I go to the pool and it is chilly. I do swim. I did it the other night. I was having a crappy day. And I thought, I think it was Monday, and I had done some exercise in the morning. It was just like a painful drudgery. I totally forgot all my tools. I was totally immersed in the drudgery. So this is hard to remember, right? I've been doing it for 8 years. I totally forgot. Later in the day, I thought, okay, that was not good. I'm going to drag my butt to the pool because I always feel good in the pool. And within 5 minutes, I had a smile on my face. And I went, because it's supportive. The water feels good. I love the tactileness of the water. Yes, it is cold for the first few minutes. Yeah.
Ellie, why don't you just mention, she just did a webinar a few weeks ago with an expert on the vagus nerve.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that link into the chat. But why don't you just say what Navaz said about the cold water and how to approach the cold water, because Shelley said cold water brings me into higher pain. So
yeah, I just opened the chat. So like I said, I'm a chicken. I have not tried it yet, but here's how it's supposed to work. You turn the water of the shower, the bath, you put ice cubes in your bath. It goes, right? You go, everything contracts. Your adrenaline goes through the roof. This gives you the opportunity to practice activating the vagus nerve by then going and breathing through it. So it's not that the cold itself activates the vagus nerve, it's your response to the cold. So that was actually, very informative when he explained that, because I was having none of it. Now I'm considering it. I still haven't done it. And it probably does, like Nancy put it, it activates endorphins, could be. Any last questions? We probably should wrap up fairly soon here.
I have one. What determines how well and how quickly patients get relief?
Yeah, so I'm gonna, if I go back to this slide, and I'll just quickly share it again. In my course, sorry, here we go. In my Healing Through Neuroplasticity course, I made an entire, so the course has 9 sessions or modules, and each one is on a different topic. So for example, one is on DIMS and SIMS and how to have safety. One is on calming the autonomic nervous system. One is on mindset. One is on mood. So all those things that I kind of highlighted today in the course, there's like a whole module on each one of those. And each module has 3 or 4 lessons, which have like a teaching video from myself of somewhere between 10, at most 20 minutes on each topic. So I have a whole teaching video on the tips, like how to optimize your practice. But these are the main ones. Be committed, be open-minded. You don't have to brainwash yourself, but you got to buy in a little bit so that your mind is augmenting your practice. Catch yourself. So I have friends now that are neuroplasticity coaches, and they say the thinking is really important. So catch yourself when you're diving into pain-related thoughts and behaviors, and be willing to do whatever it takes and shift. It's just that repetitive. It's like the baby learning to walk. It doesn't learn in a day, right? It keeps falling down over and over and over. And then all of a sudden it toddles holding onto the table, and you can just see its eyes like, oh, I get this, right? So when you have your first few days of decreased pain, when you're practicing, like in that, whoops, like in that 4 weeks, that's like the sweet spot. They're like, oh, there's something to this. So you want to practice hard enough to get those first moments of relief, even if they're small and short-lived, because it will give you hope. It will activate your dopamine. It will increase your motivation. And now you're going to be more committed. And then when you start noticing the residual effects, you know, at 2 to 3 months, you're like, okay, I'm all in, right? And then you keep going. You don't quit at that point, because you're going for zero, not zero pain. Of course, when you put your hand on the stove, you want and need pain. One of the frequently asked questions is, will it stop me from feeling pain when I need it to keep me safe? And the answer is absolutely not. So I've been teaching this for 7 years. I don't have a single person who's come back to me and said, I just injured myself because I didn't sense the danger. Mm-hmm. The brain is too smart.
Okay. I have another question. Does diet play a role in chronic pain? Why do some people get relief when they go gluten and dairy free and do an anti-inflammatory diet, and others don't?
Because we're all different. So I'm just so glad the person who asked that question, because it just gives me a chance to just repeat this. It's so critical. So many of the programs out there for anything, right? Programs for depression, for trauma, for pain, for cancer, for arthritis, they say everybody has to follow this pathway, this script. This is the answer, right? How many times have you heard someone talk about a new medical cure? It's going to work for everybody. I've been in this field, like, including my own experience, for 33 years. Everybody is different. So in my medical practice, I'll learn something new. I'll try it. 5 people will try it. It helps us. I now promote it to everybody. First 5 people that contact me say, oh my gosh, it made me worse, or it did nothing, or I couldn't afford it. Like, we're just all so different. So diet is one of those areas in which we are all so different. In my Pathways to Improvement course, I have a whole, we call it a pathway, surprise, surprise, or module on diet. And the take-home message is, we're all different. We all have different genes, and we all have different epigenetics, the genetic changes that have been passed down to us from our ancestors, over which we had no control whatsoever. These impact how we utilize food and what foods are best for us. So my take-home messages for diet, but really for everything, is try a bunch of things, have your kind of judgment open, like be open-minded, and try to really genuinely observe what works for you. Because you're going to hear tons, you should fast, you should not fast, you should be on keto, you should be on vegetarian, you should be on carnivore. Well, these all can't be true, right? But they're true for some people. But the key is which one is true for you. So in general, if you eat junk food, so some things are a little bit true. If you eat junk food, things that actually doesn't grow in the ground and doesn't grow in an animal, these foods increase inflammation. And if you have chronic pain, that's the last thing you want, is more inflammation in your body. So in general, I recommend a colorful, meaning it has to have a lot of plants in it, fruits and vegetables. So a colorful, real food, diverse. The more food different foods you eat, the better, because every food has different nutrient makeup, and you want all the nutrients, not just the same ones every day. So colorful, diverse, real food, ideally organic or high quality, because there's so much like pesticides and herbicides and hormones and antibiotics. So you want to minimize that. And probably for most people with chronic pain, it's worth trying an anti-inflammatory diet. So what the heck does that mean? There's different types of anti-inflammatory diets. The most simple ones are to cut out something like nightshades. For me, nightshades don't make any difference. So, that doesn't work for me, but for some people it makes a big difference. But in general, my take of anti-inflammatory is it has to be real food and a lot of fruits and vegetables. And for some people, cutting out, going on a very restricted diet, which is called the paleo autoimmune, is extremely helpful. So I did one of these info sessions like several months ago, 4 or 6 months ago. Someone sent me a testimonial this week saying that going on the paleo autoimmune totally changed her life. So if you'll notice it has the word autoimmune in it. So if you have an autoimmune disease, meaning you have any one of these painful diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, polymyalgia rheumatica, Sjogren's syndrome, MS, I don't know, there's dozens and dozens. If you have one of those diseases, I would strongly recommend trying the paleo autoimmune diet. You can find information online at the website of, I sometimes get the first name wrong, I think it's Karen Ballantyne. Her blog is called Paleo Mom. She's a woman who has autoimmune diseases, and she's also a research scientist. I think she's a biochemist. So she's written very detailed, very research supported reasons why this diet should work. And long story short, you have to cut out all grains, all legumes, all seeds, all nuts, all dairy and eggs. That basically leaves meat, so animal products, meat and vegetables and fruit. Very, very limited. For me personally, I'm on that diet, and it was one of the game changers 5 years ago when my health jumped up. I'm sure that diet had something to do with it, because it's a very difficult diet. Every time I go off it, my fatigue and pain goes up quite quickly. So for me personally, that's like for the rest of my life diet. It's very hard to be on, but if you have an autoimmune disease, it is absolutely worth trying. And the downside is you have to try it for about 6 months before you see the benefits. Like for me, it was even longer. It was over a year. I just stayed on it because some of my symptoms improved. It was about a year and a half being on that diet before my energy bounced up.
Sorry, Dr.
Diet
Stein.
is like a whole big topic, but that's just like a few highlights.
Sorry, that's the paleo diet?
Paleo Autoimmune, and Karen, thank you, just put up the website of Paleo Mom. And she's also saying she's done Irene Lyon's course and it was very helpful. So thanks for that. And to Shelley for her unsolicited testimonial. I love it. I think we should wrap up, or there are just maybe one or two more questions.
One more here. What is trauma and how does it play a role in chronic pain, especially for patients that have complex PTSD where they don't feel safe in their bodies and they don't feel safe in their environment?
That's a fabulous question. Again, this is my opinion, right? Like I've read a lot on trauma. I'm a psychiatrist, so I'm pretty up on trauma, but that's not like my area of focus. And I've read Bessel van der Kolk, like all of his work where he talks about the biology. So basically, I think this question is getting at what's the biology? How does trauma change our biology that somehow could increase our risk of chronic pain? My best understanding is that trauma changes our epigenetics. So what that means is in every moment of every day, just like with neuroplasticity, we're rewiring our brain. Our daily experiences also influence our epigenetics. That means the scaffolding around our genes that control what genes are turned on and what genes are turned off. There's very, very solid evidence from the ACEs study, ACE, that people who have experienced especially childhood trauma, their epigenetics have changed to turn on their stress genes. So now, if nothing changes for the rest of your life, potentially, if you're a childhood trauma survivor at least, you've got your stress, your cortisol, your fight or flight is always turned on. You won't really know that because that's all you know. That's just normal for you, right? You have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. Having all those stress pathways and hormones turned on constantly has wear and tear on the body. It makes people more vulnerable to a whole, like all mental and physical health conditions are found in higher prevalence in people who have experienced trauma. And pain is no exception. And we know when fight or flight is activated, that directly turns up the amplifier on pain. So it's a pretty direct connection, which is why what Dr. Sarno talks about isn't totally wrong, right? There's obviously some truth to what he says. People who have a lot of repressed emotion related to trauma, their epigenetics, their biology has been changed and they're more at risk. But I never go for an all or nothing. There's much more involved than just that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, do you recommend meditation, and is that a form of brain retraining?
Yes and yes. I myself am hopeless at meditation, so I'm not walking the walk on this one. I've tried it and practiced it, and I just fall asleep is what actually happens. And I gather there's solutions for this, but I haven't yet found them. But the research on meditation is really substantive. And it's actually proof that by practicing something an hour a day, like meditation, we can rewire our brain and it's measurable. And it's also proof. So we have these people called Olympic meditators, people who have meditated for more than 10,000 hours. There's not many of them in the world, but there's a few monks who have that's their whole life. They've been meditating since they were 3 and now they've got 10,000 or more hours. And when they study them, their brain, their default. So there's a book called, I always get traits and states mixed up, Altered Traits. It's a book about the science, the research on meditation. And it shows that the more people meditate, the more their default becomes this calm state where their amygdala, the emotion center, is calm, and the prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain, is active. That's what we're kind of aiming for, right? Where we want emotions, but we don't want them to be ruling our life. So the meditation research, I'm so glad someone asked that question. It's really a case study proving that everything I've said today is true.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you so much. You were a small but mighty group. Great questions. We're recording this, as you know, and it will get posted on my Facebook page. My page is called so I have a kind of a private discussion group called Dr. Stein's ME CFS, Fibromyalgia, Environmental Sensitivity, and Long COVID community page. It's really, really easy to remember. You got to type in a bunch of those words for it to pop up. So you're welcome to join there as well. There's some really great discussions, and people on there have formed their own book study. So I'm really I really encourage you to learn as much as you can, because that's how you're going to make the best empowered decisions. Colleen's also going to be posting it on her Inner Sanctum page. So you'll have lots of access to go back if there's something you want to review. And we will send Colleen the slides so she can also post the slides. So if you just want to look at them in more depth, you can. I agree, Shelley, knowledge is power. So thanks everybody for your attention.
Thank you very much,
Michael. So he's just putting up some of the links on my webpage that might have resources of interest to you. So bye everybody, and thank you, Colleen, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Haley.
much.